my buddy TJ, a former Texas Tech O-line player, invited me out to a game. I had only one response. Hell yeah! We start on the field for warm-ups and then make our way up to the suite, where the charcuterie board grabs my attention. We watch Tech take the W over TCU, and then poker is on our minds. West Texas Card House is the location, 25 on the button is the game. I'm in for $2,000. Let me explain real quickly how on the button works. Basically, when the button is in front of you, you put $25 out there. There's no small blind, no big blind, and the action starts from under the gun, which is essentially the small blind in any normal game. So 25 on the button, action starts in the small blind who doesn't have any money in there. Let's move right into the first hand. I find myself on the button here, and a villain in middle position opens it up to 100. I defend, putting in the 75 extra dollars, and we're off to a flop with pocket fours, which comes 9, 8, 7 rainbow. Middle position checks to me, and I decide to check behind, bringing in the 8 of spades. He checks it over to me for a second time, and on a board pairing card. A lot of interesting hands here. 10 jack would be a straight. Any pocket pair like 9s or 7 would have a boat. But when villain checks it over to me twice, I think we can go for a small bet here and try to target hands like ace king of spades, ace jack, ace 10, king queen, queen jack that have a little bit of equity, but we are wanting to have some protection. So I fare out for 75, and the villain in middle position puts in the call, bringing in a spade on the river, the 6 of spades to be exact, and now any 10 has us beat with a straight. So when he checks it over to us for a third time, I have a bit of showdown value. I decide to check behind, and we are going to win this first hand of the night against ace-king offsuit. Interesting float from him there on the turn. We check behind on the river and take down hand number 1. Hand number 2 is one of the most fun ones of the session, so definitely buckle up here. Evan, he is a Lubbock legend here in the poker scene. He scoops in every tournament. If they throw a tournament, he's in it, and he's taking it down. I think his specialty is Big O. We find him here in this no limit game, which is our specialty, so we're going to try to get involved. He puts the $50 straddle out there. I should say, you can straddle from any position at the table, so definitely a West Texas style game. You got the button, got a straddle from Evan in the low jack. The action comes around to me in the +1 position. I have pocket 6s and decide to raise it up to $200, and Evan decides to put in the call, which means we are going heads up, out of position with a local Lubbock legend. Say that 3 times fast. Flop comes gin for us. 10, 6, deuce, bang. We flop middle set. I bet out for $200 into Evan, and he decides to put in the call. A lot of hands here he could continue with. Any assortment of ace 10, king 10, pocket 9s, pocket 8s. He also could have a hand like queen jack suited, king jack suited, ace king that wants to peel with a club in their hand. So a lot of assortment of hands from Evan, and we see a brick on the turn, which comes the 3 of hearts. I definitely could continue betting on this card, still trying to get value from all of his suited combination of overcards, and additionally hands like pocket 9s and pocket 8s might peel one more time. However, if I did have king queen suited or ace king suited, that's not the club variety, probably would be starting with a lot of checks on this turn. So having a very strong hand like pocket 6s that also unblocks top pair is probably a decent hand to start checking with as well. That way I have a balanced range. If I check it over to Evan and he goes for a bet, we can now consider getting stacks in and going for a check raise or check calling. However, neither of those are options when I check it over to Evan, and he doesn't think about it for too long before checking behind. Now the river card is a welcome sight. It comes the 10 of hearts. Definitely a great card because we fill up and have a boat on the river. Additionally, the clubs brick off, but a board pairing card nullifies that anyways. If Evan's left with a hand like 9s or 8s, he might feel inclined to call a bet on the river. I'm saying all this because I decide to jam all in. It's an overbet. There's $825 in the middle, and I go large. It's around $1,100 for Evan to call. I have him covered. That's how much he has left in his stack. If he has busted clubs, he's just going to fold, which would be unfortunate. So there could be some argument to checking it over to Evan. He's going to bet all of his 10x. He's going to check behind with 9s, 8s, and 7s. However, he will occasionally bluff with his clubs as well. So I'm actually kind of interested to hear what you guys think down in the comments. Is this a spot where we should bet, or should we do some checking here and allowing Evan to bet for us? In this spot though, I decided to jam for $1,100 effective, and Evan does not love the spot. We definitely like seeing the non-snap fold, which means he is in a conundrum. He doesn't have a 10 because I think he would have snap called that by now. So I'm putting him on any assortment of hands, maybe ace-6 suited, 7s, 8s, pocket 9s.
Do I let him get revenge for that last bluff I pulled on him? The last spot we played together. Great river for me, honestly.
It looks like Evan's about to fold, but then all of a sudden, the devil on his shoulder tells him he's probably good in the spot. He tosses in a chip.
All right, call. 6s.
And before I can even turn over my boat, the person in the cutoff announces my hand. He just says pocket 6s, immediately calls my exact hand. Of course, I have to turn it up. Evan looks disgusted.
Was I the only one at the table that knew that?
I'm not going to bluff this guy. Jeez Louise.
And we are taking down a $3,000 pot, flopping ourselves a set, rivering a boat. Evan later told me after the session that he had 6-5 suited. So he made a light call here. My polarizing bet on the river got me paid. If I check it over to Evan, he's definitely checking behind with that exact hand. So it looks like in the moment, we made the absolute maximum. Moving right along into the third hand of the night, I look down at pocket 9s from under the gun and I raise it up to $75. Two players put in the call and the flop comes 9, jack, king, bang, we flop bottom set. I lead out for $125 and everybody folds except for one player who was already all in for his $75. He's 2 to my right and we are going to go off to a runout. The turn comes the jack of diamonds giving us a boat and the river gives us an even better boat, the king of clubs. So now we have 9s full of kings. We turn over our boat and gonna scoop against ace-7 offsuit. Nice hand there for us, chipping up to 3,200 in our stack. In this next hand, we find ourselves on the button. There's a straddle to $50 from Evan. Tony, the owner of the card room here in Lubbock, puts in the call and I decide to defend the button for only $25 more. Off to a flop we go, which gives us top pair and an 8-4-3 with 2 clubs board. The action checks over to me and I'm going to go for some value and protection. I fire out for $50 and both hooligans put in the call, leading us off to the turn, which gives me 2 pair and better yet, it's not a club. And the action checks over to me once again. Wait, hold up. No, it doesn't. Tony actually leads out into me for $125. Interesting line from him. He calls the flop, leads out on the turn. I was probably going to fire out for like $200 on this turn. So 125 kind of seems like a bargain. It almost feels like he's trying to name his price with a club or straight draw like 5-6 or ace deuce. So I decided to raise him up. I think I have the best hand here and I don't want to give him a cheap price, or better yet, give Evan a cheap price to put 125 in and somehow suck out on me and make a better hand. I make the raise, Evan's out of the way, and Tony decides to put in the call for 250 more. Off to the river we go, which comes the 9 of hearts, only completing 10-7 and 10-queen. I say only because front door clubs broke off, so when Tony checks it over to me now, I decide to go for one more street of value. I look over at his stack. He only has around 500 to 600 behind. I debate checking it behind here because it's possible Tony might have a set of 4s or 3s. Maybe he has a straight or a better 2 pair being jack 9, but I can't not put his entire stack in, so I jam for 520 and we get snap called. That's not good news. I'm curious to see what he has, and I'm sure you guys are as well. And he turns over pocket 3s. Interesting line from him, calling the flop, trying to fade a club, and then betting turn and calling my jam on the river. He got the maximum there, $2,000 in a 3-way limped pot. And jack 8 for 2 pair going down in flames. And we worked our way up to 3,200, but we start the next hand with only 2,400 now in our stack. All right, this one's a fun one against TJ, the man of the hour who invited us out here to Lubbock. He makes it 75 from the hijack, and I 3-bet him to 225 with ace jack off. Tony from that last hand decided to seat change on my left. It's not good enough that he gets my chips. Now he wants position on old Wolfgang here. And immediately he gets to work putting in the cold call to $225, which brings in TJ, puts in that 225 as well. 3 ways to the flop, and we're in between both of them like an Oreo. The pot 675, and the flop comes king 3-3 rainbow. TJ checks it to me, and in between 2 opponents, I usually start with a check. However, this board probably would not be a bad idea to go for a bet. not too many hands that we're losing to if we had a king. I think pocket fives and pocket sixes from the opponent's standpoint would probably call once, and then if I fire it again, they would find the fold. But I listened to my coach and start with a check when you're in between two opponents can't be the worst situation in the world. Tony checks behind, and that brings in the 6 of diamonds on the turn. Pocket sixes now make a full house. But when TJ checks over to me for a second time, I think this is a good spot to go for a bet. I think a lot of his kings would have let out on this second diamond turn card. So I'm confidently going for a bluff and firing out for $300. Tony relinquishes his cards, but TJ gets a little bit sticky here and finds the call. At this point, he could have any assortment of diamond draws. He could have a hand like 4-5. He also could have a pocket pair like 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s. And then, of course, maybe some random kings, but I'm heavily discounting the kings because he didn't lead out on the turn. TJ puts in the call. There's 1,300 in the middle to fight for. In the river comes the 6 of clubs, pairing the board once again. We now have 3s and 6s with an ace. Not exactly the worst hand of the world, so when he checks over to me, I could consider checking behind, given the fact I have 2 pair and some shutdown value. However, I don't want to check behind and him show me pocket 5s or pocket 7s, and we probably could have gotten that to fold. So I'm definitely thinking about going for a bluff here. At the same time, I do have showdown value, and sometimes when you have that, you got to take it. I check behind, $1,300 in the middle. Are we going to win it? No, it's a good thing we didn't go for a bluff. TJ was for sure calling. King Queen offsuit, making top pair, and he's going to get rewarded with that $1,300 pot.
And one point about this one guy who owned a bunch of farms.
All right, Tony and I are going to battle once again. He raises it up to $75. 2 callers over to me on the button. I have 25 out there, and I decide not to go for the 3-bet, which I think is probably the more standard route. But Tony raised under the gun. He probably has some very good hands in there as well. So I decide to play it passive, put in the call, and off the flop we go, which gives me top pair on an ace-5-3 with 2-heart board. When Tony checks and the 2 other players check as well, I decide to go for some value here and bet my 1 pair. I fire out for 100 and only Tony puts in the call. So what kind of hands could he have here in the spot when he raises under the gun and then check calls this flop? Of course, he could have a hand like ace-5 or ace-3 that's slow playing. He also could have ace-king, ace-queen, although I think those probably would want to bet considering there's 2 hearts out there. And then I think a lot of other strong hands like kings and queens and jacks make a lot of sense. He puts in the call, and we see another heart on the turn, which comes the 5. Tony checks it over to me for a second time, and now we're faced with an interesting game tree here between either betting or checking behind. If we think about all the hands he could have in this spot, ace-king and ace-queen are probably still in there. More likely so is pocket kings, pocket queens, and pocket jacks. And those hands that have a heart in it, I don't think are going to fold now that they picked up a flush draw. So I think checking behind here probably is the better option and seeing what the river brings in. That's what I decided to do, and we get a clean card, which comes the 4 of diamonds. Tony does not decide to check it over to me. Instead, he goes for what looks like thin value and fires out for $275. And now I'm in a weird spot. I've sort of under-repped my hand by checking behind on the turn, so that is pushing me to put in the call. However, his bet is so small. What hands do we beat? What bluffs can we find here? Hearts gets there. Ace-5 already had us beat. Ace-king, ace-queen had us beat. The only hands that we're really beating are pocket kings, pocket queens, and pocket jacks. However, are those going for a small sizing on this river? Thinking that I'd probably snap them off with any ace. That seems a little bit ambitious. I think most likely all of those hands are just checking. So really the only bluffs I could find here are maybe king, queen with the king or queen of hearts, but obviously not suited because that would have a flush. So at the end of the day, I make a pretty disciplined fold here, and Tony's going to flash us 1 card before mucking his other one face down. It's the ace of diamonds. If you guys have any hunch as to what Tony had in this spot, please let me know down below because I'm really stumped. Did he really play ace-king or ace-queen this way? Did we make a tight fold and he just went for value with ace-10 or ace-9? I guess we'll never know because he shows the ace of diamonds. The other one goes down into the muck. One thing's for sure though, the rich get richer. Tony has our number tonight. He's taking down yet another pot, $775, going over his way. But no fear, we downgrade now to ace-10 offsuit on the button. The villain in the +1 makes it 75 to go. I decide to defend and we flop ourselves top pair on a 10-6 deuce board, and the opponent fires out for $125. It's kind of a strangely large bet. You would expect them to go somewhere between $50 to $90. 125 is a little bit larger than that, so I'm proceeding with some caution here, but obviously top pair putting in the call is a no-brainer. 3 of clubs is a nice one, so when the villain decides to slow down and check, now I can confidently put him on some weak pocket pairs, as well as hands like Jack Queen, King Queen, Ace Jack, Ace Queen, Ace King. When he checks it over to me, I think betting is mandatory. I fire out for $170 and definitely targeting hands like King Queen suited, Ace King suited, things that have 2 overcards. I want to get some value and some protection from. Surprisingly, he puts in the call, so we could have any of those hands. He also could have hands like 9s, pocket 8s. We're going to see what the river brings in, and it comes the deuce of hearts. He checks it over to me once again, and I'm going in between betting and checking behind. A lot of the money in poker comes from thin value bets, and I fire out for $125. If I'm thinking about his entire range of hands that he arrives on the river with, it's going to be a lot of weak hands, and I pretty much have the nuts at this point. Given the way the hand is played, I think 125 would be the maximum extraction here. I think he can still call with hands like pocket 7s or pocket 8s, and sure enough, he does in fact put in the call. I turn over my cards, and we never see his, as he mucks them face down, and we get rewarded with 10 $100 bills, a 1K pot being shipped over to me. And I feel like I made the maximum in that hand. This next hand's a pretty one. Tony decides to straddle from the hijack. So when the action folds around to me, I look down at Queen Jack of Hearts from the low jack, and I make it 4x, $200 to go, and Tony puts in the call, leading us off to a flop, which comes pretty great for us, Queen 8-6 Rainbow. Out of position against Tony, I like a half pot sizing here, and I go a little bit less than that for $150. Will Tony fold? Will he raise? Will he just put in the call? He goes with option C on the Scantron here. He puts in the call. We see the turn card, which comes the 10 of spades. I think on this card, we want to do a lot of checking. He could have hands like 9 Jack. Pocket 8s and pocket 6s are definitely still in his range. As you saw earlier, he didn't raise his set of 3s on the flop. So why would he do that here with pocket 8s or pocket 6s? Additionally, hands that we were beating like Queen 10 now have us beat as well. So I love checking here. And let's see what Tony decides to do. He checks behind for some pot control, so it seems, and the 5 of clubs on the river really shouldn't change too much unless he had a hand like exactly pocket 5s. I decide to check over to him once again, my logic being if I go for a small bit of value here and I get raised, I don't really love that spot. However, if I check it over to him, it allows him to bluff with some spade draws and miss straight draws like King Jack exactly, I think, and maybe Ace Jack as well. So I check it over to him, planning to call a bet, and Tony surprises me by going very small. You would think if he was bluffing, he'd probably go larger, like 500 to 700. So his $230 bet, you can hear me say at the table,
That is a very milky bet right there.
Still, I have top pair, and I played my hand in a way where I can't fold, so I put the chips in the middle, and he shows me the goods. Jack 9 offsuit. He had a gutter on the flop, called me there, and then turns it immediately with a 10 of spades. He's taking on that $1,200 pot. I win one, I lose one, I win one, I lose one. We're just barely breaking even at this point. Right, 2 hands ago, I look down with $1,600 in my stack with Ace King offsuit from the hijack. I make it $125 to go. The villain on the button decides to put in the call. Flop comes pretty great for us on a King Jack 6 with 2 diamond boards. I'm out of position to him. I go for around half the size of the pot for $125. He folds. We win the pot. Easy game. And that brings us into the last hand of the night, looking down at the beautiful Ace 10 of hearts from the low jack, and I decide to make it a standard 3x to $75. The cutoff puts in the call, and Javier on the button puts in the call as well. We are going 3 ways to the flop, which comes 9-5-4 with absolutely no hearts out there. The action checks through on the flop, bringing in the King of Hearts on the turn. That would be a welcome sight on the flop. I probably could have gone for a bet. So when it comes on the turn, I now can go for a delayed c-bet, so it seems, and hopefully, some way, somehow, everyone will fold and just believe that I have a king. I go for around half the size of the pot, and unfortunately for us, both players do not believe us. putting in the call. So it's possible one of them has a weak king, someone could have a flush draw, being the spade variety, and then of course there are some straight draws like ace deuce, ace 3, 6, 7, 7, 8, all of that good stuff. Let's see what the river brings in. The 4 of hearts is a very good card because it reduces pocket fours to just one combination. Additionally, it's not a card that brings in the straight or the flush, so I think if I wanted to continue and bluff, the 4 of hearts is definitely one of the best cards to do it on. Ace 10 of hearts, would want to go for a bluff here with ace high. I could still get hands to fold like 5, 6, be having me beat, pocket 6s, pocket 7s. Let's go for a small milky bet here and represent the king to the maximum. I fire out for $250. The cutoff gets out of the way, but Javier does not look like he wants to fold. But after a little bit of deliberation, Javier makes the right decision for me. He folds his cards. I don't show it at the table, but later let him know that I bluffed him with ace 10 of hearts, and we are getting rewarded with the last hand of the night, a nearly $800 pot, taking us from $300 stuck to just under $100 of profit. We rack up our chips and head over to the cage, but not before getting dropped off at Lubbock Airport. We have a red-eye flight back over to Dallas. All right, you guys, that wraps up the fun video here from Lubbock. 12 hours in Lubbock, Texas. I got in at 4 p.m., went to the game, then played some poker, made $48 in that session, and back at the airport 12 hours later. It's 4 in the morning. I'm going back to Dallas. Hope you guys enjoyed that fun experience. I've heard of a few bigger games that are running in Lubbock because of this trip, so I might be back out here in the near future. If you guys are new, drop a follow, subscribe, comment down below what you want to see more of. Good luck on the felt, you guys. I'll catch you in the next video as always. Peace.
Is that Wolfgang Poker?